The bullet went through my son's chest before I even heard the gunshot. 1 second Tristan was laughing about his college acceptance letter. The next second blood was spreading across his white shirt like spilled wine. The Mafia Don standing over us didn't even check if he got the right target. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I still remember every detail of that Tuesday night in March. Tristan and I were celebrating at Romano's, this quiet Italian place we'd been going to since he was 12. He'd just gotten accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship. My boy was going to be an engineer. "Dad, I can't believe it's real," Tristan said, cutting into his chicken parmesan. "For years ago you thought I'd never make it past community college." I smiled, watching him. 19 years old, my whole world sitting across from me in a booth by the window. His mother died when he was 7, so it had been just us two against everything life threw our way. I'd retired from military service 5 years earlier to focus on raising him right. "You proved me wrong, son. Your mom would be so proud." That's when the restaurant door opened. 5 men walked in wearing expensive suits that couldn't hide the shape of guns underneath. The kind of men who make normal people look away fast. But I wasn't normal people. 25 years of Black Ops training doesn't just disappear because you hang up the uniform. I recognized the leader immediately. Dominic Torino, the Mafia Don who ran this city's underworld. I'd seen his face in classified files years ago, but never had reason to cross paths with him. He was shorter than I expected, maybe 50 years old, with gray hair slicked back and cold black eyes that swept the restaurant like he owned it. "Everyone out," Dominic announced. His voice was calm, almost polite. "Restaurants closed for private business." The other customers scattered fast, leaving money on tables and rushing for the exit. The staff disappeared into the kitchen. In 30 seconds, it was just us, them, and the sound of Tristan's fork clacking against his plate. "Dad," Tristan whispered. He sensed the danger, but didn't understand it. I kept my hands visible on the table, calculating distances and exit routes automatically. 5 armed men, 1 window behind us, kitchen entrance 20 feet away. I could take maybe 3 of them before they got Tristan. Not good enough odds. "Just stay calm," I told him quietly. Dominic walked straight to our table. His men spread out, hands inside their jackets. He stopped right next to Tristan and looked down at him with something like disappointment. "You're Marcus Rivera's kid," Dominic said. It wasn't a question. My blood went cold. Marcus Rivera was a small-time drug dealer who'd been skimming from Dominic's operation. I'd read about it in the local news 3 weeks ago. Rivera had been found shot execution-style in his car. "No, sir," I said carefully. "This is my son, Tristan Kane. We're not who you think we are." Dominic glanced at me for the first time. "Kane." He studied my face, then shook his head like it didn't matter. "Kid looks just like Rivera. Close enough." "Please," I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "You have the wrong people. My son's never been involved in anything illegal. He's a college student." Dominic pulled out a chrome pistol. "Rivera's dead, but his kid keeps dealing on my corners. Time to send a message to all the little dealers who think they can steal from me. I'm not Rivera's son," Tristan said, his voice cracking. "My name is Tristan Kane. Check my ID." But Dominic had already made up his mind. In my line of work, I'd learned that some men don't care about being right. They only care about being feared. "Nothing personal, kid." The gun came up fast. I lunged forward, but I was too far away, too slow. The gunshot was deafening in the small restaurant. Tristan's body jerked backward, his eyes going wide with shock and pain. "Tristan." I caught him as he fell from the chair, blood soaking through his shirt, spreading warm and sticky across my hands. His breathing was shallow, rapid, his face going pale. "Dad, I can't, it hurts." "You're going to be okay," I lied, pressing my hands against the wound. But I'd seen enough bullet wounds to know this one was fatal. The bullet had gone through his lung, maybe his heart. "Stay with me, son." Dominic holstered his gun like nothing had happened. "Told you it wasn't personal." Kid was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong face. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at me. You call the cops, tell them what you saw, and I'll come back to finish what I started. Understand. I nodded, but I wasn't really listening anymore. All my attention was on Tristan, whose breathing was getting weaker by the second. Dad, he whispered. I'm scared. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Tell Mom. Tell her I made it to Stanford. His eyes closed. His breathing stopped. My son, my only child, my entire reason for living, was gone. I sat there on the restaurant floor, holding his body, feeling something break inside my chest that would never heal. 25 years of military training, all the classified missions, all the enemies I'd eliminated in service of my country, and I couldn't save the one person who mattered most. But as I held Tristan's lifeless body, another feeling started growing alongside the grief. Something cold and familiar that I'd buried when I retired from active duty. Dominic Torino had no idea who he'd just destroyed. He saw a broken father holding his dead son. He had no clue that he'd just declared war on a man who'd spent a quarter-century learning how to make people disappear without a trace. The old Victor Kane was awakening. And this time, it was personal. 3 days after I buried my son, I couldn't remember eating or sleeping. The house felt too big, too quiet without Tristan's music blasting from his room or his terrible jokes at breakfast. His college acceptance letter still sat on the kitchen counter where he'd left it, and I couldn't bring myself to move it. The funeral had been small. Tristan's friends from high school showed up, crying and confused about why this happened to someone so good. My old military buddy Mason came, standing silent at the back like he understood I needed space. The priest said something about life being precious and unfair, but the words just floated past me like smoke. I stood at the gravesite after everyone left, staring at the fresh dirt covering my son's casket. The anger I'd felt that night at Romano's had settled into something colder, sharper, something I could use. Mr. Kane. I turned to find a woman in her mid-30s wearing a detective's badge on her belt. She had short brown hair and tired eyes that had seen too much violence. Detective Harper, she said, extending her hand. I'm investigating your son's murder. I'm very sorry for your loss. I shook her hand without speaking. I know this is a difficult time, but I need to ask you some questions about what happened that night. The restaurant owner found the scene after receiving an anonymous call. You'd already left with Tristan's body. I took him to the hospital, I said. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. They pronounced him dead on arrival. I gave my statement to the officers there. I read it, Harper said carefully. You told them you didn't see the shooter's face, that it happened too fast. I met her eyes. That's right. She studied me for a long moment. Mr. Kane, I've been a detective for 12 years. I know when someone's lying to protect themselves, but I also know when someone's lying because they're planning something dangerous. I don't know what you mean. Dominic Torino, she said quietly. He runs every illegal operation in this city. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets, human trafficking. We've been trying to build a case against him for 7 years, but witnesses disappear or refuse to testify. Judges get bought off. Evidence vanishes from lockup. Sounds like he's untouchable, I said. He is, Harper agreed. Which is why I'm telling you to let this go. I understand you want justice for Tristan, but going after Dominic will only get you killed too. These people don't play by rules. I almost laughed. She had no idea that rules were just suggestions to men like me. I appreciate your concern, detective. But I'm just a grieving father trying to figure out how to live without my son. Harper handed me her card. If you remember anything else about that night, call me. And Mr. Kane, don't do anything stupid. Tristan wouldn't want you throwing your life away for revenge. She walked back to her car, leaving me alone with the fresh grave and the weight of everything I was about to do. That evening, I drove 40 minutes outside the city to a bar called The Anchor. It was the kind of place where questions weren't asked and conversations weren't overheard. Mason was already waiting in a back booth, nursing a whiskey. Victor, he said as I sat down. I'm sorry about Tristan. That kid was special. Mason had been my handler during my last 5 years in Black Ops. When I retired, he stayed in, running intelligence operations from behind a desk. We'd saved each other's lives more times than I could count. I need information on Dominic Torino, I said. Mason's expression darkened. I figured that's why you called. Victor, this guy isn't like the targets we used to handle. He's got connections everywhere. Police, politicians, federal agents. You can't just eliminate him and walk away clean. I'm not planning to eliminate him, I said. Not yet, anyway. I need to understand his operation first. How he moves, who protects him, where his money comes from. Mason pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a detailed file with photos, addresses, and organizational charts. Dominic runs 3 main operations, Mason explained. First, he's got a smuggling ring bringing weapons and drugs through the harbor. Second, he controls underground gambling, casinos, sports betting, the works. Third, he runs protection rackets across half the city's businesses. I studied the information, my training kicking in automatically. Every operation had weak points, vulnerabilities that could be exploited. He's got a younger brother named Ryder who handles the finances, Mason continued. Ryder's the brains, Dominic's the muscle. Together they're worth about $200 million, but most of it's hidden offshore where we can't touch it. What about his enforcers? Blake Donovan is his top guy, former boxer, handles the violent work. Then there's a crew of about 20 soldiers who do everything from collections to eliminations. They're loyal because Dominic pays better than anyone else in the game. I memorized every name, every face in the file. Victor, Mason said seriously, what are you planning? Dominic killed my son because of a mistake, I said. He thought Tristan was someone else's kid and didn't even care when I told him the truth. He murdered an innocent 19-year-old boy and walked away laughing. So you want revenge? I want justice, I corrected. There's a difference. Mason finished his drink. Justice means involving the police, the courts, the system. Revenge means doing what you and I used to do for our country. The system can't touch him. You said so yourself. Then what's your play? I looked at the file again, at Dominic's smiling face in a photo taken at some charity event where he pretended to be a legitimate businessman. I'm going to dismantle everything he's built, I said. His money, his power, his protection. I'm going to make him lose everything that matters before he understands what's happening. And when he finally realizes who's destroying him, it'll be too late to stop it. Mason was quiet for a moment. You know I can't officially help you with this. I know, but unofficially. He pushed the phone toward me. Keep the file. I'll update you if anything changes in his operation. Just promise me you won't get yourself killed. Tristan would want you to survive this. I pocketed the phone and stood. Tristan wanted to be an engineer. He wanted to build things that help people. Instead, he got murdered by a monster who faces no consequences. Victor, I appreciate the concern, Mason. But this conversation is over. I drove home through empty streets, the file burning in my pocket like a lit fuse. Detective Harper was right that I was planning something dangerous. Mason was right that this wasn't a sanctioned operation. But they were both wrong about one thing. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Dominic Torino had spent years hurting innocent people because he believed he was untouchable. He'd created an empire built on fear and violence, protected by corruption and money. My son died because of that empire. How many other sons and daughters had died the same way? I pulled into my driveway and sat in the darkness, staring at my house. Inside was Tristan's empty room, his unfinished homework, his dreams that would never come true. Dominic took all of that from me. Now I was going to take everything from him. The old Victor Kane was fully awake now, and the hunt had begun. 2 weeks after the funeral, I became invisible. Not literally, but in the way that mattered most. Dominic Torino had no idea I existed as a threat. To him, I was just another broken father who'd lost a son and crawled away to grieve. That misconception was my greatest weapon. I spent the first week doing nothing but surveillance. Mason's file gave me locations, but I needed patterns. I needed to understand how Dominic's empire breathed, where it was strong, and where it would bleed if cut properly. Dominic owned a nightclub called Apex where he conducted most of his business. Every Thursday night, trucks arrived at the loading dock behind the building around 2 in the morning. I watched from a rooftop across the street through military-grade binoculars as men unloaded crates marked as restaurant supplies. The way they handled those crates told me everything. Too careful, too nervous. Whatever was inside wasn't food. I photographed everything. Faces, license plates, timestamps. Building a case wasn't my job, but documenting everything created options for later. The smuggling operation ran through Pier 19 at the harbor. Dominic had 3 warehouses there, supposedly storing imported furniture. I spent 2 nights watching shipments arrive from overseas. The customs inspector who checked the containers spent exactly 4 minutes on each one before stamping paperwork and leaving. 4 minutes wasn't enough time to inspect anything properly. That inspector's name was in Mason's file. He was on Dominic's payroll, making $60,000 a year in bribes to look the other way. One more piece of the puzzle. On my 3rd week of surveillance, I made my first move. It was small, surgical, and visible. One of Dominic's smuggling trucks was scheduled to transport weapons from Pier 19 to a distribution point upstate. I knew the route because I tracked the same truck 3 times before. They always stopped at a rest area exactly halfway through the journey. I got there first, dressed in mechanic's coveralls I'd bought from a thrift store. When the truck pulled in and the 2 drivers went inside for coffee, I had exactly 8 minutes. The truck's GPS tracker was easy to find, standard commercial model attached under the dashboard. I didn't remove it. Instead, I placed a second tracker deeper in the engine compartment where they'd never think to look. Then I did something simple that would cause big problems. I loosened the truck's oil drain plug. Not enough to fall off immediately, but enough that it would vibrate loose after another 100 miles of highway driving. The engine would seize up, the truck would break down, and whatever was inside would sit on the side of a public road where state police might get curious. But I wasn't counting on police to find it. I had something better planned. The drivers came back, finished their coffee, and drove off without noticing anything wrong. I followed at a distance using the tracker I'd planted. Exactly 93 miles later, the truck started smoking and limped to the shoulder of Interstate 80. While the drivers cursed and called for help, I made an anonymous call to the state police from a burner phone. There's a broken-down truck on I-80 near mile marker 147. The drivers are acting suspicious, and I think they might be transporting something illegal. Then I drove away and waited. 2 hours later, Mason sent me a text. State police just seized a truck full of unregistered firearms. Big bust. They're looking for whoever tipped them off. I deleted the message and burned the burner phone in my fireplace. 1 shipment down. Dominic would lose money and product, but more importantly, he'd lose trust. His people would start wondering how the police knew to check that specific truck. Paranoia was a useful tool. My next target was the gambling operation. Dominic ran an illegal casino in the basement of a restaurant called Giovanni's. High-stakes poker, blackjack, roulette, all of it rigged to guarantee the house won big. Important people went there, politicians and business owners who couldn't afford to be seen in a place like that. I couldn't hit the casino directly without exposing myself. But I could hit something more valuable, the money. Dominic's brother Ryder collected cash from the casino every Sunday night and transported it to a bank in the Cayman Islands where it got cleaned through shell companies. The cash sat in Ryder's home safe over the weekend before the transfer. Getting into Ryder's house required skills I hadn't used in 5 years, but muscle memory is a beautiful thing. He lived in a gated community with security cameras and roving guards. I waited until 3 in the morning on a rainy Saturday when visibility was poor. The security cameras had a blind spot near the eastern fence that lasted exactly 40 seconds between sweeps. I went over the wall with climbing gear, crossed Ryder's backyard, and picked the lock on his back door in under 30 seconds. No alarm. Ryder was arrogant enough to think the community security was sufficient. Inside, the house was dark and quiet. Ryder was asleep upstairs with his wife. I moved through the first floor like a ghost, finding his office behind a mahogany door. The safe was built into the wall behind a painting of Venice. Classic. I'd cracked tougher safes in hostile territory under enemy fire. This one took me 6 minutes. Inside was exactly what I expected, $340,000 in cash, stacked neatly in bundles. I didn't take the money. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I did something that would hurt Dominic worse than theft. I photographed every serial number on every bill. Then I photographed the documents in the safe, ledgers showing where the money came from and where it was going, complete with offshore account numbers. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, locked the safe, and left through the back door. Total time inside, 11 minutes. Ryder would never know I'd been there. But the FBI would know about those offshore accounts very soon. I sent the photographs to Mason through an encrypted channel. Can you get these to someone in federal financial crimes? Anonymously. His response came an hour later. Already done. They'll have warrants by Monday. The third piece of Dominic's empire was the protection racket. He squeezed money from dozens of businesses across the city, restaurants, shops, construction companies. Pay up or bad things happen. It was old-fashioned mafia economics. I couldn't stop all of it, but I could break one link in the chain. Blake Donovan, Dominic's top enforcer, was scheduled to collect protection money from 6 businesses on Tuesday morning. I'd watched him do it twice before. Same route, same timing. This time would be different. Blake drove a black Mercedes and always parked in the same spot while making collections. I got to his car 15 minutes before he did and planted a small tracking device under the rear bumper. Then I called Detective Harper from another burner phone and disguised my voice. Blake Donovan is collecting illegal protection money this morning. If you follow him, you'll have enough evidence to make an arrest. Harper was smart. Who is this? I hung up. Blake made his first 2 collections without incident. On the third stop, Detective Harper and 3 squad cars boxed him in. I watched from a coffee shop across the street as they searched his car and found $60,000 in cash along with a gun he wasn't legally allowed to carry. Blake got arrested. Dominic would bail him out eventually, but the damage was done. Every business owner who'd seen the arrest would start wondering if they could stop paying protection money. Dominic's grip on the neighborhood would weaken. 3 moves in 3 weeks. A seized weapons shipment, FBI attention on offshore accounts, and a key enforcer arrested. To the outside world, these looked like unconnected bad luck. But Dominic was smart enough to know that luck didn't work this way. Someone was targeting him. He just didn't know who yet. I sat in my car outside Apex nightclub that Thursday evening, watching Dominic arrive in his armored SUV. He looked tense, angry, scanning the street like he was searching for ghosts. He should be scared. This was only the beginning. My phone buzzed with a message from Mason. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Dominic's organization is starting to fracture. People are asking questions. I replied with one word. Good. Then I drove home to my empty house and slept better than I had since Tristan died. The shadow war had begun, and Dominic Torino still had no idea who was destroying everything he'd built. Dominic's world started crumbling faster than I'd expected. When you pull the right threads, even the strongest empires unravel quickly. The FBI raid happened on a Wednesday morning. I watched from my car 3 blocks away as federal agents swarmed one of Dominic's primary warehouses at Pier 19. They brought dogs, forensic teams, and enough firepower to start a small war. Mason had delivered my evidence perfectly. The offshore account numbers I'd photographed from Ryder's safe led investigators straight to shell companies hiding millions in drug and weapons money. The warrant was airtight. By noon, the news was everywhere. Federal raid targets suspected criminal enterprise flashed across every channel. Dominic's lawyer gave a statement calling it harassment. but his voice shook just enough to tell me the truth. They were panicking. I didn't celebrate. This was just step one. That evening, I made my second major move. For weeks, I'd been building a relationship with someone who could hurt Dominic worse than any raid. Eliza Monroe, an investigative journalist who'd been chasing the Torino story for 3 years. She'd published small articles about suspected corruption, but never had enough evidence to make the big accusations stick. I was about to change that. I'd created an encrypted email account using routing techniques that would take federal investigators months to trace. The message I sent Eliza was simple. I have documents proving Dominic Torino's connections to city officials. Are you interested? She responded in under an hour. Who is this? Someone who wants the truth exposed. Check your secure Dropbox. I'd uploaded everything. Photographs of the ledgers from Ryder's safe, financial records showing bribes to the customs inspector, and something even more damaging I'd acquired through Mason's intelligence network. Text messages between Dominic and City Councilman Colin Waters discussing payments for favorable zoning decisions. Colin Waters was one of the city's most respected politicians, a family man who preached law and order while secretly taking envelopes stuffed with cash. His protection was one of the main reasons Dominic had operated untouched for so long. Eliza spent 2 days verifying the documents. On Friday evening, her article went live on the newspaper's website. City Councilman's secret partnership with organized crime. Exclusive documents reveal years of corruption. The story was a bomb. By Saturday morning, Colin Waters was trending on social media. By Sunday, protesters gathered outside City Hall demanding his resignation. By Monday, federal investigators opened a formal inquiry. And Dominic? He was losing his most valuable asset, political protection. I monitored everything from my home office, tracking news coverage and police radio chatter. The pressure was building exactly as I planned. But I knew Dominic wouldn't just accept defeat quietly. Men like him fought back when cornered. The proof came Tuesday night. I was doing surveillance near Apex when I spotted something that made my blood run cold. 3 of Dominic's men were watching a house in the suburbs, the home of Marcus Rivera's actual son, a kid named Anthony, who was 16 years old. They were planning to finish what they'd started, to kill the right target this time. Anthony Rivera had nothing to do with his father's drug dealing, but Dominic didn't care about innocence. He cared about sending messages. I couldn't let another kid die because of this monster. The hit was scheduled for midnight. Dominic's crew would break in, eliminate Anthony and probably his mother too, then vanish. Clean and simple, the way they'd done it dozens of times before. I got there first. At 11:30, I disabled the street light outside the Rivera house using a pellet gun with a suppressor. Darkness was my advantage. Then I positioned myself in the shadows near their driveway and waited. Dominic's men arrived in a black van at 11:52. 3 of them. I recognized Blake from his mugshot, plus 2 others whose names I didn't know. Blake was out on bail from his arrest last week, which meant Dominic had posted a small fortune to get him back on the street. They moved toward the house with guns drawn, professional and efficient. They'd done this before. I moved faster. The first one went down when I struck the pressure point behind his knee, then knocked him unconscious with a blow to the temple. He collapsed without making a sound. Blake heard the movement and turned, but I was already inside his guard. A strike to his solar plexus folded him over. Then I put him to sleep with a chokehold. The third man realized what was happening and tried to raise his weapon. I disarmed him in 2 moves, broke his trigger finger, and left him whimpering on the ground. 3 armed men neutralized in under 20 seconds. Some skills you never forget. I zip-tied their hands and feet, then dragged Blake to his van. I taped a note to his chest written in block letters. You killed the wrong son. Stay away from the Riveras. Then I called 911 from yet another burner phone. 3 armed men with illegal weapons outside 847 Maple Drive. They were trying to break into a house. I was gone before the sirens arrived. The next morning, The news reported that police had arrested 3 men on attempted burglary and weapons charges. Blake Donovan's bail was revoked. He'd be sitting in jail waiting for trial now, unable to do Dominic's dirty work. But more importantly, Dominic would receive that note and finally start to understand. Someone knew about Tristan. Someone was systematically destroying his organization. Someone wasn't afraid of him. I sat in my living room that afternoon, monitoring 5 different news channels. Colin Waters had resigned under pressure. The FBI had frozen 3 of Dominic's offshore accounts. 2 more businesses had refused to pay protection money after Blake's arrest. My phone rang. Mason's number. "Victor, I don't know what you did last night, but it's working. Dominic held an emergency meeting with his remaining crew this morning. Our sources say he's paranoid, questioning everyone, convinced there's a mole inside his organization." "There is no mole," I said. "Just someone outside tearing him apart piece by piece. He's going to figure out it's you eventually. I'm counting on it." Mason was quiet for a moment. "When he does figure it out, he'll come after you with everything he has left. Let him try." I hung up and looked at the photo of Tristan on my mantle, his high school graduation picture, that proud smile that I'd never see again. "It's working, son," I said quietly. "He's losing everything, just like he made us lose you." Dominic Torino's empire was cracking. Soon it would shatter completely. And when it did, he'd finally understand the price of killing an innocent boy in front of his father. The note changed everything. I knew the moment Blake delivered it to Dominic, the game would shift. For weeks, I'd been an invisible force dismantling his empire. Now he knew someone was specifically targeting him for Tristan's death. The question was whether he'd connect the dots back to me. The answer came faster than I expected. Thursday morning, I was leaving the grocery store when I noticed a gray sedan parked across the street. Same car I'd seen outside my house yesterday. Same car that had followed me to the bank 2 days ago. Dominic had put surveillance on me. I didn't react, didn't let on that I'd noticed. I drove home normally, parked in my driveway, and carried groceries inside like a man with nothing to hide. But through my kitchen window, I watched the sedan park 3 houses down. They were sloppy, one of Dominic's lower-level guys, not Blake's caliber. That told me something important. Dominic was stretched thin, using second-rate soldiers because his best people were either arrested or busy protecting his crumbling operations. I called Mason from a secure line. "Dominic's got eyes on me. Single tail, amateur hour. He's connecting you to the attacks." Mason sounded worried. "Maybe. Or he's checking everyone who had contact with him recently. Either way, I need to know his next move. I'll dig into it. Meanwhile, watch your back." I spent the afternoon acting completely normal, mowing the lawn, checking mail, nothing that suggested I was anything more than a grieving father going through the motions. The surveillance car stayed put. But that evening, Mason called with information that made my blood run cold. "Victor, you need to hear this. We intercepted chatter from Dominic's crew. He's planning something big for tomorrow night. They're going after families, specifically families of people who've crossed him or might be cooperating with investigators." "What kind of families?" "The customs inspector who got questioned by the FBI? Dominic's sending people to his house. The business owner who refused to pay protection last week? Same thing. He's sending a message that nobody is safe, not even innocent relatives." My jaw tightened. This was exactly what Dominic had tried to do to the Rivera family. He was escalating, trying to reassert control through terror. "How many targets?" "At least 4 families that we know of." "Victor, the FBI doesn't have enough to arrest him yet. These people are sitting ducks." I thought fast. I couldn't save everyone, but I could disrupt the plan enough to expose what Dominic was doing. "Send me the target list and timeline." "Victor, send it, Mason. Those people are innocent. Their only crime was being connected to someone Dominic wants to hurt." An hour later, I had everything I needed. 4 hit teams, for locations, all scheduled between midnight and 3 in the morning. Dominic wasn't personally involved. He never was, but he'd ordered the attacks. I couldn't be in 4 places at once, but I could make sure none of those hits went smoothly. The first target was the customs inspector, a man named Gerald who lived alone after his divorce. Dominic's team would have the easiest time there. No witnesses, no complications. That made it my first priority. I arrived at Gerald's house at 10:30 and knocked on his door. He answered nervously, probably wondering who showed up this late. "Mr. Gerald? My name is Victor Kane. I need 2 minutes of your time, and it might save your life." He tried to close the door, but I put my hand against it. "Men are coming to kill you tonight because you talked to the FBI about Dominic Torino. You can call the police and tell them what I just said, or you can die in the next few hours. Your choice." His face went pale. "How do you know this?" "Because I'm the one who's been destroying Dominic's organization for the past month. And right now, he's trying to scare everyone into silence by targeting families. Yours included." Gerald stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his phone and dialed 911. While he talked to the dispatcher, I left. The police would stake out his house now, and Dominic's hit team would find cops instead of an easy target. One down. The second target was a business owner named Patricia who'd refused to pay protection money. She lived with her teenage daughter. I couldn't just knock on her door. She'd never believe a stranger warning her about mob assassins. Instead, I called in a bomb threat to her building from a payphone. "There's a gas leak at 2847 Harrison Avenue. The whole building needs to be evacuated immediately." Fire trucks and police arrived within minutes. Patricia and her daughter were evacuated to a hotel for the night. When Dominic's team showed up, they'd find an empty apartment and too many cops to risk anything. 2 down. The third and fourth targets were trickier. A lawyer who'd consulted with federal investigators and a restaurant owner who'd testified about the protection racket. Both had families. Both lived in residential areas where police presence would draw attention. I couldn't evacuate them or call in false emergencies without exposing the pattern. So I did something riskier. I intercepted Dominic's hit teams. The crew heading to the lawyer's house drove a white van. I tracked them using information Mason provided about their usual vehicles. At midnight, I followed them at a distance until they stopped at a red light 2 blocks from their target. Then I pulled alongside and fired 3 shots into their front tire with a suppressed pistol. The van lurched, the tire exploded, and they skidded to a stop. Before they could react, I was gone. They'd spend the next hour dealing with a flat tire and explaining to police why they had weapons in the vehicle. The lawyer's family would sleep safely tonight. The final team was already positioned outside the restaurant owner's house when I arrived. 2 men in a dark SUV, waiting for the right moment to move in. I couldn't disable their vehicle without alerting them, so I did something simpler. I called 911 and reported a suspicious vehicle with men watching a house. I think they might be planning a burglary. They've been sitting there for 20 minutes. A patrol car arrived 7 minutes later. The hit team had to abort and drive away or risk being questioned by police. For targets, for disruptions. None of Dominic's hits would succeed tonight. But I'd made a critical mistake. The surveillance car that had been watching my house was gone when I returned home at 2 in the morning. That should have been my first warning. The second warning was the front door, locked, but the scratches around the deadbolt were fresh. Someone had broken into my house. I drew the pistol I kept in my jacket and entered slowly, every sense on high alert. The living room was empty. Kitchen clear. My office, the light was on. Sitting in my desk chair was a man I'd seen in Mason's files. One of Dominic's inner circle, a strategist named Julian who handled the thinking while Blake handled the violence. "Mr. Kane," Julian said calmly. He wasn't armed, at least not visibly. "Please, have a seat. We need to talk. Get out of my house." "In a moment. First, I have a message from Dominic." Julian picked up the photo of Tristan from my desk. "He knows it was you. The shipments, the FBI tips, the attacks on his people. He figured out that the grieving father was actually Victor Kane, retired Black Ops assassin." My finger moved to the trigger. "Put down my son's photo." Julian set it down carefully. Dominic wants you to know he respects your skills. What you've done in 4 weeks is impressive, but it's over now. He's offering you a choice. Walk away and live, or keep fighting and die. Tell Dominic, I'm just getting started. Julian stood slowly. He thought you'd say that, which is why he wants you to know he's done playing defense. Starting tomorrow, he's coming after everything you care about. Your friends, your old military contacts, anyone connected to you. He'll burn your entire world until there's nothing left. He already took everything that mattered when he killed my son. Did he? Julian smiled coldly. Because I notice you have a sister in Colorado. And Mason Carter, your old handler? He's got a wife and 2 kids. Rage flooded through me. You touch them, that depends on you. Julian interrupted. Walk away now, and everyone lives. Keep attacking Dominic, and the bodies start piling up. He walked past me toward the door, then paused. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, we come for everyone you've ever known. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. I stood in my office, heart pounding, mind racing. Dominic had figured me out, and now he was threatening innocent people to make me stop. But he'd made a critical error. He'd threatened the people I cared about, thinking it would scare me into backing down. Instead, he'd just given me a reason to accelerate everything. I called Mason immediately. Get your family somewhere safe. Now, don't tell me where, just move them. Victor, what happened? Dominic knows it's me. He's threatening anyone connected to me. You need to disappear until this is finished. How do we finish it? I looked at Tristan's photo on my desk, remembering my son's smile, his dreams, everything Dominic had stolen. By making sure Dominic can't threaten anyone ever again. Dominic's threat changed my timeline. I'd planned to take months dismantling his empire piece by piece. Now I had hours before he started killing innocent people to get to me. Mason called back within 20 minutes. My family's moving to a safe house. What's your play? Dominic's going to run. Men like him always do when the walls close in. He's got enough offshore money to disappear to a country with no extradition. I need to stop him before he gets on a plane. The FBI's watching him, but they don't have enough for an arrest yet. Then we give them enough. I'd been holding back evidence. The most damaging files I'd stolen from Ryder's safe. Recordings Mason had helped me obtain. Witness statements I'd collected anonymously. Everything that would put Dominic away for life. But only if he was in custody first. How fast can you get me flight manifests for private airports within 200 miles? I asked. Give me an hour. While Mason worked his contacts, I packed a go bag with cash, fake identification, and weapons. If this went wrong, I'd need to disappear too. But I wasn't worried about myself anymore. Dominic Torino had killed my son. Now he wanted to kill everyone I'd ever cared about. That ended tonight. Mason sent the flight data at 4 in the morning. 3 private jets were scheduled to depart between 6 and 8 a.m. One belonged to a shipping company Dominic didn't control. The second was heading to Miami, too public for someone running. The third was registered to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, the same islands where Ryder laundered money. Destination, Sao Paulo, Brazil. No extradition treaty with the United States. That was Dominic's escape route. The flight left at 7:30 from a small airport 40 minutes outside the city. I had 3 hours. I called Detective Harper from a burner phone. She answered groggily. Who is this? The person who's been feeding information to the FBI about Dominic Torino. Listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once. Dominic is fleeing the country this morning from Riverside Airport, 7:30 departure to Brazil. If you want him, you need to move now. Wait, how do you? I hung up and destroyed the phone. Then I drove to Riverside Airport to make sure Dominic actually showed up. If he'd changed plans, I needed to know. The private terminal was quiet at 6 a.m., just a few staff members preparing for the day. I parked where I could watch the entrance and waited. At 6:40, a black SUV pulled up. Dominic stepped out wearing expensive clothes and sunglasses, followed by his brother Ryder and 3 bodyguards. They carried luggage toward the terminal like tourists heading on vacation. Except tourists don't travel with armed security. Dominic was running. 7 minutes later, 3 FBI vehicles screamed into the parking lot, blocking the exits. Agent Natalie Reed stepped out with a dozen armed agents behind her. Dominic Torino, you're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Dominic's face went white. For a moment, I thought he might try to fight or run. But he was smart enough to know he was surrounded. This is harassment, he said calmly, but his hands were shaking. I'm traveling on business. To a country with no extradition? Interesting business trip. Natalie cuffed him personally. We have evidence linking you to multiple criminal enterprises. You're done. They arrested Ryder too, along with the bodyguards for weapons violations. I watched from my car as they loaded Dominic into a federal vehicle. He looked around desperately, probably searching for whoever had betrayed him. His eyes swept past my car without recognition. He still didn't know what I looked like, didn't connect me to the broken father from the restaurant. That would change soon. As the FBI convoy drove away, I followed at a distance to make sure they actually took him to federal lockup. No bail, no escape, no last-minute legal tricks. Dominic was in custody, and the evidence Mason and I had compiled would keep him there. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Dominic's trial started 6 days later. The prosecutors had everything they needed: financial records, witness testimony, forensic evidence linking him to dozens of crimes. The case was airtight. I attended every single day, sitting in the public gallery where Dominic could see me. On the second day, he finally recognized my face from the restaurant. The moment our eyes met, understanding flooded through him. The grieving father. The broken man who'd watched his son die. The invisible enemy who'd destroyed everything. Dominic's face went pale. He whispered something to his lawyer, who glanced back at me nervously. But there was nothing they could do. I wasn't testifying, wasn't breaking any laws by sitting in a courtroom. I was just watching justice happen. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness described Dominic's empire of violence and corruption. The financial evidence showed millions in illegal profits. The weapons seized from his warehouses told their own story. On the final day, the jury took 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Judge Preston looked down at Dominic with disgust. You've terrorized this city for years, destroyed families, corrupted institutions, and murdered innocent people. This court sentences you to life in prison without possibility of parole. Dominic's brother Ryder received 25 years for money laundering and conspiracy. As guards led Dominic away in chains, he turned and locked eyes with me one final time. His expression held rage, fear, and something else, respect. He knew exactly what I'd done and how impossible it should have been. This isn't over, he shouted as guards dragged him toward the door. You hear me, Kane? This isn't over. But it was. Dominic Torino would spend the rest of his life in a federal prison, and his empire was finished. I walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. Tristan was still gone, and nothing would bring him back. But the monster who'd killed him would never hurt anyone else again. Detective Harper caught up with me on the courthouse steps. Mr. Kane, I know what you did. I attended a trial. That's not illegal. You dismantled a criminal empire and gift-wrapped it for the FBI. That's vigilante justice. That's one theory, I said. Or maybe Dominic just got sloppy and karma caught up with him. Harper studied me for a long moment. Your son would be proud. My throat tightened. Thank you, detective. She walked away, leaving me alone on the steps. I looked up at the sky, remembering Tristan's face, his laugh, his dreams. It's done, son, I whispered. He can't hurt anyone anymore. For the first time since the funeral, I felt like I could breathe again. But that feeling wouldn't last. 3 days after Dominic's sentencing, I started putting my life back together. I'd begun clearing out Tristan's room, donating his clothes to charity, and boxing up memories I wasn't ready to throw away. His Stanford acceptance letter still sat on my kitchen counter, a reminder of the future that was stolen from him. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, plain white with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with typed words. Dominic wasn't working alone. Check his partner. You didn't finish the job. No signature. No explanation. I stared at those words for a full minute, my mind racing. Dominic had operated his empire with his brother Ryder, who was now serving 25 years. Who else could the message be referring to? I called Mason immediately. Someone just sent me an anonymous message claiming Dominic had a silent partner. What do you know about this? Nothing in the files mentioned a partner, Mason said slowly. But Victor, mob organizations this big usually have financial backers. Someone with clean hands who stays completely hidden while funding the operation. Can you dig into Dominic's financial network? Look for money sources we missed. I'll see what I can find. I couldn't just wait, so I started my own investigation. I pulled out every document I'd photographed from Ryder's safe and examined them with fresh eyes. Most were straightforward, ledgers showing drug profits, casino earnings, protection money. But one document stood out that I'd overlooked before. A bank transfer record showing quarterly payments of $200,000 into Dominic's operation from something called Civic Development Fund. I'd assumed it was another shell company, but now I looked closer. The fund's registered address was City Hall. My blood ran cold. City Councilman Colin Waters had already been exposed and arrested for taking bribes from Dominic. But what if the relationship went deeper than bribes? What if Colin wasn't just protecting Dominic's empire? What if he was funding it? Mason called back 3 hours later. Victor, you need to hear this. I traced the Civic Development Fund. It's technically a legitimate nonprofit for urban renewal projects, but the money never goes to actual development. It gets rerouted through 6 shell companies before landing in Dominic's accounts. Who controls the fund? Colin Waters established it 8 years ago. He's been siphoning city tax money and federal grants, cleaning it through the fund, then splitting profits with Dominic. Victor, Colin wasn't just a corrupt politician taking bribes. He was Dominic's silent partner from the beginning. Everything clicked into place. Colin had the political power to protect Dominic's operations. He had access to massive amounts of money through city contracts and federal programs. And when Dominic needed someone eliminated, Colin could provide information about targets, schedules, and vulnerabilities. That night at the restaurant, I said slowly, when Dominic shot Tristan, he said they were looking for Marcus Rivera's son. How did Dominic know Rivera had a son? How did he know what the kid looked like? Mason was quiet for a moment. City records, birth certificates, school registrations, DMV photos, all available to someone with Colin's access. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Colin Waters had provided the intelligence that led to Tristan's death. He'd given Dominic the photo of Rivera's actual son, which Dominic used to identify his target. Except Dominic killed the wrong kid because Tristan happened to look similar. My son died because of Colin Waters' information and Dominic Torino's mistake. Where is Colin now? I asked, my voice deadly calm. He posted bail 2 weeks ago. He's under house arrest awaiting trial, but his lawyers are confident they can get the charges reduced. The evidence against him is mostly about bribery, not the deeper criminal partnership. Victor, he might walk with just a few years in minimum security. That wasn't justice. That wasn't enough. I need everything you have on Colin Waters. Home address, security setup, daily routine, everything. Victor, what are you planning? I'm planning to finish what I started. Mason sent the files, and I spent the next 2 days studying Colin's life. He lived in an upscale neighborhood with his wife and 2 teenage children. Electronic ankle monitor for house arrest, security cameras around the property, and weekly check-ins with a probation officer. On paper, Colin looked like a family man caught up in a scandal. In reality, he was a criminal who'd built a fortune on corruption while pretending to serve the public. And he'd helped orchestrate my son's murder. But I needed proof before I could expose him. The anonymous message said to check Dominic's partner, which meant someone knew the truth and wanted me to find it. Someone who had access to information I didn't. The question was, who sent that message? I decided to take a risk. I sent an encrypted email to the address Eliza Monroe had used when I'd leaked documents about Dominic. I received information about Colin Waters being more than just a bribed official. Do you know anything about a silent partnership between him and Dominic? She responded within an hour. Meet me. We need to talk in person. We met at a park the next morning. Eliza looked tired, like she'd been working around the clock. She handed me a folder full of documents. I've been investigating Colin for 3 months, she said. After the bribery story broke, I kept digging. I found evidence that he wasn't just taking money from Dominic. He was actively directing criminal operations, drug distribution routes, protection racket targets, even which witnesses to intimidate. Colin was the architect. Dominic was the muscle. Why hasn't this been reported? Because I can't prove it definitively. The paper trail is too clean, and my sources are scared to testify. Dominic's in prison, but Colin still has powerful friends protecting him. That's why I sent you the message. I looked at her sharply. You sent the anonymous envelope? You took down Dominic in 4 weeks. I figured if anyone could expose Colin, it's you. Was I wrong? I studied the documents. More evidence of the Civic Development Fund, emails between Colin and offshore banks, meeting records showing Colin and Dominic together at locations that weren't disclosed in official investigations. It wasn't enough for a prosecution, but it was enough for me to know the truth. Colin Waters was responsible for Tristan's death just as much as Dominic. Maybe more, because Colin had provided the intelligence that set everything in motion. What are you going to do? Eliza asked. I stood, taking the folder with me. I'm going to make sure Colin faces real justice. Not a plea deal, not reduced charges. Real consequences. Be careful, she said. Colin's more dangerous than Dominic. He's smarter, more connected, and he knows you're coming now. I walked back to my car, mind already working through strategies. Dominic had been powerful but obvious. Colin was subtle, hiding behind respectability and political connections. Taking him down would require a different approach. Something surgical and undeniable. Something that would expose not just Colin, but everyone protecting him. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're asking questions about me. Stop now, or your sister in Colorado has an accident. Colin Waters knew I was investigating him. And just like Dominic, he was threatening innocent people to make me back down. These men never learned. Threatening my family didn't scare me. It just showed me exactly how far I needed to go. The threat against my sister told me everything I needed to know. Colin Waters was desperate and dangerous. Men who threaten families are men who've run out of options. I called my sister Rachel immediately. Pack a bag and take the kids to Mom's cabin in Montana. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even your husband until you're already there. Victor, what's happening? Someone made a threat. It's probably nothing, but I need you safe until I handle it. Please, Rachel. Trust me. She heard something in my voice that made her stop arguing. Okay, we'll leave tonight. With my family secured, I turned my full attention to Colin Waters. But this time, I needed to be smarter. Colin had survived in politics for 15 years by being careful, by keeping his hands clean while others did the dirty work. Taking him down required exposing not just his crimes, but his entire network of protection. I started with his lawyer, a man named Gregory Kane who'd represented corrupt officials for 2 decades. Mason's intelligence showed Gregory had offshore accounts in the same banks Colin used. They weren't just attorney-client. They were partners in laundering money. If I could flip Gregory, I could unravel everything. But lawyers don't flip easily. They're trained to protect secrets. I needed leverage. I spent 2 days following Gregory's routine. He lived alone in a downtown condo, worked late hours at his firm, and had expensive tastes that didn't match his reported income. On Thursday night, I watched him meet with someone in a parking garage, a brief exchange of a manila envelope for cash. I photographed everything, then followed the other man to a pharmaceutical company. 30 minutes of research revealed the company was under investigation for illegal drug trials. Gregory was taking payoffs to make evidence disappear. Now I had leverage. Friday morning, I was waiting in Gregory's office when he arrived. He jumped when he saw me sitting in his client chair. "How did you get in here?" "That's not important. What's important is this." I slid the photographs across his desk. "You're taking bribes to obstruct a federal investigation. That's 10 years minimum, and you'll lose your law license permanently." Gregory's face went pale. "Who are you?" "Victor Kane. You might remember my son, Tristan Kane, who was murdered by Dominic Torino 4 months ago." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "I had nothing to do with that." "No, but Colin Waters did. He provided the intelligence that led to my son's death, and you're helping him avoid justice. So here's your choice. Help me expose Colin's criminal enterprise, or I send these photos to the FBI and the State Bar Association." "You're blackmailing me?" "I'm offering you a chance to do the right thing for once in your corrupt life. Colin's going down either way. You can go down with him, or you can save yourself." Gregory stared at the photographs for a long moment. I could see him calculating odds, weighing risks. Finally, he looked up. "What do you need?" "Everything. Financial records, communication logs, evidence of Colin directing Dominic's criminal operations. And I need you to testify. If I testify against Colin, I'm a dead man. Colin's going to prison. He won't be able to hurt you from there." Gregory pulled out his laptop with shaking hands. "I've kept backup files of everything. Insurance in case Colin ever turned on me. Bank transfers, encrypted messages, recordings of meetings where Colin discussed criminal activities. It's all here." He transferred the files to a secure drive I provided. Hundreds of documents proving Colin wasn't just a corrupt politician. He was a crime boss who'd used his political position to build an empire that rivaled Dominic's. "There's something else you need to know," Gregory said quietly. "Colin has a contingency plan. If he thinks he's going down, he's going to eliminate everyone who can testify against him. There's already a contract out on 3 witnesses from the Dominic trial." My jaw tightened. "When?" "This weekend. Colin's using freelance contractors, not Dominic's old crew. Professional killers from out of state. I couldn't let more innocent people die because of Colin Waters. Give me names and locations of the targets." Gregory provided everything. 3 witnesses, all under protection but not secure enough to stop professional assassins. I had maybe 24 hours. I called Detective Harper from a secure line. "Colin Waters has ordered hits on 3 witnesses from the Torino trial. I'm sending you names, locations, and evidence. You need to move them to federal protection immediately." "How do you know this?" "Because I just spent 2 days taking apart Colin's organization the same way I took apart Dominic's. The difference is, I'm not waiting weeks this time. Colin's finished by Monday." I hung up and contacted Agent Natalie Reed, the FBI agent who'd arrested Dominic. I sent her everything Gregory had given me, the financial records, the communications, the evidence of Colin directing criminal operations while serving as a city councilman. "This is enough for arrest warrants," Natalie said when she called back. "Where did you get this?" "From someone who finally decided to do the right thing. Colin's planning to kill witnesses this weekend. If you're going to move, it needs to be now. We'll have a tactical team at his house within the hour." I drove to Colin's neighborhood and parked where I could watch his house. At 3 in the afternoon, 6 FBI vehicles surrounded the property. Agents in tactical gear stormed inside while others secured the perimeter. Colin was dragged out in handcuffs, screaming about his rights and demanding his lawyer. His wife and children watched in horror as federal agents searched their home, carrying out boxes of evidence. But I knew Colin would try one last move. Men like him always had emergency plans. That's when I saw it. A figure in dark clothes climbing out of a second-story window at the back of the house. Someone had been inside waiting for this exact moment. I recognized the movement patterns immediately. Professional operator, probably the same freelance contractor Colin had hired to kill the witnesses. He'd been Colin's insurance policy, positioned to eliminate evidence or create a distraction if law enforcement came. The contractor dropped to the ground and started moving toward the perimeter fence. The FBI agents were focused on Colin and hadn't seen him. I couldn't let him escape. I intercepted him at the fence line, moving silently through the neighbor's backyard. When he reached for the fence, I struck fast, disarming him, neutralizing his threat, and leaving him unconscious on the ground. Then I zip-tied his hands and called out to the FBI agents. "You've got another one back here." Armed contractor who was hiding in the house. Agents swarmed the area, securing the unconscious man and finding enough weapons on him to start a small war. They also found a phone with encrypted messages from Colin ordering the witness eliminations. Agent Natalie found me standing near the fence. "Mr. Kane, we need to talk." "About what?" "About how you keep showing up at exactly the right moment with exactly the right information. About how you've taken down 2 major criminal organizations in 4 months. About what really happened to Dominic Torino's empire." I met her eyes. "Dominic killed my son. Colin Waters provided the intelligence that made it happen. I did what any father would do. I made sure they faced justice. You did more than that. You conducted a systematic campaign of vigilante action." "Prove it," I said calmly. "Or charge me with something. Otherwise, I'm leaving." Natalie studied me for a long moment. "I can't prove it. Every move you made was technically legal or untraceable. You're either the luckiest man alive or the most skilled operator I've ever seen. Maybe I'm both." She handed me her card. "If you ever want to use those skills for something official, call me. We could use someone like you." I pocketed the card and walked back to my car. Colin Waters was in custody. His hired killer was neutralized, and the evidence would put him away for decades. Tristan's death was finally, truly avenged. Colin Waters' trial began 3 weeks later, and unlike Dominic's case, this one moved with brutal efficiency. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records proving years of embezzlement, encrypted messages directing criminal operations, testimony from Gregory Kane that confirmed Colin's role as the true architect behind Dominic's empire. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the same spot in the gallery. Colin saw me on the first morning, and his expression shifted from arrogance to something darker. He knew exactly who had destroyed him. The prosecution painted a devastating picture. Colin hadn't just been a corrupt politician taking bribes. He'd built a criminal organization that used city resources to fund illegal operations. He'd embezzled over $40 million from urban development programs meant to help struggling neighborhoods. He'd directed murders, ordered witness intimidations, and corrupted every institution meant to protect citizens. Mr. Waters used his position of public trust to become a crime lord, the prosecutor said during closing arguments. He hid behind respectability while destroying lives. The evidence shows he was directly responsible for ordering intelligence gathering that led to the death of 19-year-old Tristan Kane, an innocent college student murdered by mistake. Hearing Tristan's name in that courtroom, hearing the truth finally spoken publicly, broke something loose inside me. My son's death hadn't been random violence. It had been the result of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy run by a man the city had trusted. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all 37 counts. Guilty. Judge Preston showed no mercy during sentencing. "Mr. Waters, you betrayed every principle of public service. You exploited the vulnerable, enriched yourself through corruption, and caused immeasurable harm to this community. This court sentences you to life in federal prison without possibility of parole." Colin's face remained blank, but his hands gripped the table hard enough that his knuckles turned white. As guards moved to escort him out, he turned and looked directly at me. Unlike Dominic's rage-filled outburst, Colin said nothing. He just nodded slightly, a gesture that acknowledged what we both knew. I had systematically dismantled 2 criminal empires and ensured both men would die behind bars. Then he was gone, led away in chains to spend the rest of his life in a maximum security facility. I walked out of the courthouse into late afternoon sunshine. For the first time in 5 months, I felt like the weight pressing on my chest had lifted slightly. The men responsible for Tristan's death were in prison. Justice had been served. But revenge and justice don't fill the empty spaces left by loss. Detective Harper caught up with me on the courthouse steps. "Mr. Kane, can we talk?" We walked to a quiet bench in the courthouse plaza. Harper looked tired but satisfied. "I know what you did," she said quietly. "I can't prove it, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. But I know you orchestrated everything that brought down Dominic and Colin. I didn't confirm or deny. Does it matter how justice happened, as long as it happened? Legally? Yes. Personally?" She paused. "Two major criminal organizations are gone. Dozens of lives were saved. The city's safer because of what you did. So maybe it doesn't matter. What happens now? Now you move forward. You find a way to live with what happened to Tristan. You don't let revenge consume what's left of your life." She stood to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, your son would be proud of how you honored his memory." After she left, I sat alone on that bench for a long time, thinking about Tristan. His laugh, his dreams, the future he'd never have. No amount of justice would bring him back, but at least the monsters who killed him would never hurt anyone else. Over the next month, I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I cleaned out Tristan's room completely, donating his belongings to students who needed them. His Stanford acceptance letter went into a frame on my wall, a reminder of what could have been. Mason called one afternoon with unexpected news. "Victor, there's money. A lot of it." "What are you talking about?" "The government seized Colin and Dominic's assets, about $260 million total. There's a victim compensation fund being established. As the father of someone killed because of their criminal conspiracy, you're entitled to a significant portion." "I don't want their money." "Then use it for something good. Use it to honor Tristan." That conversation planted a seed. 2 weeks later, I met with lawyers to establish the Tristan Kane Foundation. Its mission was simple: support families affected by organized crime, fund college scholarships for students who'd lost parents to violence, and provide resources for witness protection programs. The foundation's first scholarship recipient was Anthony Rivera, the son of the drug dealer Dominic had originally targeted. Anthony was 16, scared, and trying to escape the life his father had lived. The scholarship would send him to a good school far from the city, give him a chance to build something better. "I'm sorry about what happened to your son," Anthony said when we met. "My dad made bad choices, and your son paid the price." "That's not right." "No, it's not," I agreed. "But you're not your father. You get to make different choices. Tristan would want his memory to help kids like you find better paths." The foundation grew quickly. Within 6 months, we'd helped 20 families relocate safely, funded 12 college scholarships, and partnered with law enforcement to improve witness protection protocols. Each person we helped felt like a small victory against the darkness that had taken my son. One morning, I visited Tristan's grave for the first time since the trial ended. I'd avoided coming here, afraid the grief would overwhelm me. But standing at his headstone, I felt something different than pain. I felt peace. "It's done, son," I said quietly. "Dominic and Colin are in prison for life. The foundation is helping people every day. Your death wasn't meaningless. It ended 2 criminal empires and created something that's going to help hundreds of families." The wind rustled through trees in the cemetery, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and flowers. "I miss you every single day. I think about who you would have become, what you would have built at Stanford, the life you should have had. But I'm trying to make sure some good came from losing you. I hope that's enough." I placed fresh flowers on the grave and stood there for a while longer, remembering my son's smile, his terrible jokes, his excitement about college. Those memories would always hurt, but they were also precious. Proof that Tristan had existed, had mattered, had been loved. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. "Agent Natalie Reed." "Mr. Kane, I wanted you to know, we just arrested 14 people connected to what's left of Colin's network. The investigation you started is still producing results. City officials, corrupt cops, business owners who were part of the conspiracy. They're all going down. That's good news. It's more than good. You started something that's cleaning up years of corruption. The city's going to be safer because of what you did. After we hung up, I sat in my car and thought about the past 5 months. I'd gone from a broken father to a man who'd systematically destroyed 2 criminal empires. I'd operated outside the law, but in service of justice. I'd risked everything to make sure the men who killed my son faced consequences. And now it was truly over. I drove home through streets that felt somehow lighter, safer. Tristan was still gone, and nothing would ever change that. But his death had sparked a change that would protect countless other families from the same pain I'd endured. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since the night my son died. And when I dreamed of Tristan smiling, proud of what his father had done to honor his memory. The letter arrived exactly 1 year after Tristan's death. Plain envelope, handwritten address, postmarked from a federal prison in Pennsylvania. I opened it carefully, recognizing the name in the return address, Dominic Torino. Victor Kane, I've had a year to think about what you did. How you destroyed everything I built without firing a single bullet at me. How you turned my own empire into the weapon that buried me. I respect that. In my world, respect is earned through power, and you showed more power than anyone I've ever faced. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Your son died because of my mistake. I killed an innocent kid who had nothing to do with my business. I've done terrible things in my life, things I won't apologize for. But killing Tristan Kane was wrong. I know saying sorry won't bring him back. I know you'll hate me until the day you die. But I wanted you to know that I think about that night too. I see his face sometimes. I remember how you held him while he died. For whatever it's worth from a man like me, I'm sorry. Dominic Torino. I read the letter 3 times, feeling emotions I couldn't quite name. Anger, because an apology from my son's killer meant nothing. Sadness, because Tristan was still gone. But also something unexpected, closure. Dominic would spend the rest of his life in prison, haunted by the consequences of his actions. Colin Waters would die behind bars knowing a grieving father had outsmarted him completely. Justice had been served in ways the legal system rarely achieves. I burned the letter in my fireplace and watched the paper turn to ash. That afternoon, I drove to Tristan's grave. The headstone was weathered now, flowers from previous visits dried and replaced with fresh ones I'd brought. I sat on the grass beside the grave, something I'd been doing every week for the past year. "Hey son," I said quietly. "It's been a year. A whole year without you. And it still doesn't feel real sometimes. I wake up expecting to hear your music playing too loud, or find your Stanford acceptance letter on the counter." A family walked past in the distance, visiting their own loved ones. The cemetery was peaceful today, just the sound of wind through trees and birds singing. The foundation helped its 50th family last week. A mother and her 2 kids whose father was killed testifying against a gang. We got them relocated, new identities, college funds for the kids. They're safe now because of what we built in your name. I pulled out my phone and showed the grave a photo, even though Tristan couldn't see it. This is Marcus Chun. He just graduated from engineering school, the same program you would have been in at Stanford. The foundation paid his full tuition. He grew up in foster care, had nobody supporting him. But he made it because we gave him the chance you never got. My voice cracked slightly. I wish you were here to see what your legacy became. You wanted to build things that help people. The foundation does that every single day. I sat there in silence for a while, remembering my son. His laugh that was too loud. His terrible jokes that made me groan. The way he'd gotten so excited about Stanford that he'd called me 3 times in one day just to talk about it. I made them pay, Tristan, Dominic, Colin, everyone who hurt you. They'll never see freedom again. But more importantly, I made sure your death meant something. 50 families are alive and safe because of the changes your story created. Hundreds more will be helped in the years to come. I stood slowly, my knees stiff from sitting. I'm going to keep fighting, son. Keep helping families escape violence. Keep making sure kids like you get the futures they deserve. That's my promise to you. I placed my hand on the headstone one more time, then walked back to my car. The grief would never fully leave, but I'd learned to carry it alongside purpose and hope. My phone rang as I drove home. Mason's number. Victor, there's a situation. Remember that task force agent Reed mentioned? They want you to consult on a case. Major human trafficking ring operating through the harbor. They need someone with your skill set. I thought about it for a moment. I'd spent a year helping people through the foundation, working within legal boundaries. But some situations required different approaches, the kind of skills I developed over 25 years in Black Ops. Tell them I'll look at the case file. Victor, are you sure? You've built a good life with the foundation. Getting involved in operations again. Some fights are worth fighting, I interrupted. Tristan would want me to help people who can't help themselves. If I can stop traffickers from destroying more families, I have to try. Mason was quiet for a moment. Okay, I'll set up the meeting. But Victor, be careful. You've been through enough. I will. That evening, I sat in my living room surrounded by photos of Tristan. His baby pictures, school photos, the snapshot of us at his high school graduation. Each one was a memory I'd never lose. My son had been murdered because evil men operated without consequences, protected by corruption and fear. I'd torn down their empires and built something better from the ruins. But the work wasn't finished. There were still families suffering, still children at risk, still monsters who believed they were untouchable. I looked at Tristan's Stanford acceptance letter hanging on my wall. He'd wanted to be an engineer, to build things that made the world better. I couldn't give him that future, but I could honor his memory by protecting others who deserved the chances he never got. My phone buzzed with an email from the foundation. Another family requesting help, another child needing protection from violence. I read their story. A teenage girl whose father witnessed a murder, and now the entire family was being hunted. I replied immediately, setting up emergency relocation and security measures. This was what the foundation existed for. This was Tristan's legacy. Before I went to bed, I wrote in the journal I'd been keeping since Tristan died. One entry every night, talking to my son about the day, about the people we'd helped, about the difference his memory was making. Year 1 is done, Tristan. It was the hardest year of my life, but also the most meaningful. I turned grief into purpose, pain into protection for others. I think you'd be proud of that. Tomorrow I start new work, helping stop traffickers who destroy families. It's dangerous, but it's right. You taught me that doing the right thing matters more than taking the easy path. I love you, son. I'll carry you with me into every fight, every mission, every life I help save. You're gone, but your impact on this world is just beginning. Sleep well. Dad. I closed the journal and looked out my window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, I hoped Tristan could see what his father had become, not just a man consumed by revenge, but someone who transformed tragedy into hope. The foundation would continue growing. The families we helped would build new lives. And when necessary, I'd use my skills to stop the kind of evil that had taken my son from me. This was my life now. This was Tristan's legacy. And this was my promise, that no other father would have to bury their child because monsters operated without fear of consequences. Justice had been served. Now it was time to prevent the next tragedy. I want to hear from you. What did you think of Victor's journey? Did justice feel complete? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. I love connecting with viewers around the world.